The recording has begun.
It is 6 p.m. The Town of La Plata Planning Commission is called to order. Madam Clerk, will you please conduct a roll call for the purpose of quorum verification?
Chair Banks,
Here.
Vice Chair Hudnall. Nothing heard, marking as absent. Councilman Gutenberg,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Whale,
Here.
Commissioner Ford.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And in the absence of Vice Chair Hudnall, Commissioner Ford, you have all rights and privileges as a commissioner, i.e. voting. Councilman Gutenberg, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Visible with liberty and justice for all.
For the purposes of ex parte disclosure, Commissioners, Councilman Gutenberg, have any of you engaged in any off-the-record communications with applicants, developers, neighbors, or other stakeholders regarding any of the projects before the commission or outside of the public hearing process? Councilman Gutenberg?
I have not.
Commissioner Miller?
No.
Commissioner Will?
No.
Commissioner Ford?
No.
Neither have I. Next on the agenda is the public hearing session for the zoning text ZTA 2026, adequate public facilities ordinance roads. The applicant is the town of La Plata, and the project is townwide. The request is to amend Article X of the adequate public facilities requirements in Chapter 191, zoning of the La Plata Municipal Code for the purpose of creating, managing, and maintaining adequate public road facilities in the town of La Plata. Madam Clerk, will you please review the purpose of the procedures for the public hearing?
Town of La Plata public hearings are conducted in the following manner. A sign-in sheet is provided at the entry of council chambers for any public hearing attendees to register to speak if they have not already done so in advance. Registration to speak will end when the public hearing is opened. The presiding officer will call registered speakers to the podium. Speakers who have registered to speak in advance via the town webpage will be recognized prior to speakers who registered upon arrival at the public hearing. At the discretion of the presiding officer, speakers' comments may be limited to 3 minutes and may not be yielded. Written documents for the record submitted in advance of the public hearing are provided to the presiding officer prior to the opening of the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I officially call to order the public hearing on ZTA 2026, adequate public facilities ordinance as it relates to roads at 6:03 p.m. Madam Clerk, apart from the certificate of publications published in the agenda packet, are there any additional notices of public hearing for the record?
Yes, Madam Chair, for the record, the public hearing was advertised in the Southern Maryland newspaper in the May 15, 2026 and May 22, 2026 issues as reflected on the certificate of publication attached to the meeting agenda. Notice of this public hearing was also advertised on the public portal in the town's meeting management platform.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have a list of people who have signed up to speak this evening?
Madam Chair, no one has signed up to speak.
Thank you. Director Dooley, can I turn to you for the planning staff presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the commission. At the last Planning Commission meeting on May 5th, 2026, the commission discussed the proposed APFO text under zoning text amendment 02-2026 for roads. The commission expressed support for the draft text, but directed staff to make the following amendments to the draft ordinance at this time. First was to provide a revision requiring the town to regularly update the town's official street map of the town of La Plata. The map is to incorporate and identify all local, county, and state highway administration roads in La Plata, including their respective minimum levels of service for their respective roads of each roadway. A second was to provide provisions in the draft ordinance requiring the town to facilitate interjurisdictional government coordination and cooperation with the county and state highway administration when traffic mitigation measures for a proposed project in La Plata identify the need to mitigate development impacts to existing roadways outside the town's control to make such improvements. And then lastly, the commission asked to clarify in the draft ordinance references to existing development and proposed new development for reader clarity. To address the directed revisions to the draft ordinance under proposed zoning text amendment 02-2026, staff has added subsection H to section 191.93, the adequate public facility study, requiring annual update to the town's official street map of the town of La Plata, following the processes and procedures that are already contained within section 170-7 of the La Plata Municipal Code. As such, it will require town council approval for future updates. Although the last update was in 2024, there is no current requirement specifying when the town's official street map is to be updated. So this new provision will help fill that gap for consistency. Second, staff has clarified when the APFO provisions are referencing proposed development for reader clarity throughout the ordinance. In your packet, you'll see the text is in blue where it identifies proposed to address that concern comment. And then finally, with regard to facilitating the county and SHA coordination with the town concerning traffic and road mitigation measures resulting from proposed new development in town, staff has added subsection B to section 191.96, standards, criteria, and procedures for adequate public facilities. This was to provide a broad public policy directions. Specifically, the subsection directs that the town shall create and utilize a traffic impact study implementation manual or implementation manual. The manual will be prepared as a corollary document after the codification of the draft APFO provisions for roads. So fundamentally, this is basically the implementation. This is getting into the weeds. And so this is a kind of a normal corollary document that not only the Charles County has, but other agencies within Maryland. So this will really provide more specificity. The ordinance as it's proposed is a little bit more general to provide, again, flexibility, but the manual will provide the specific details for implementation purposes. Since the last meeting, staff has received 3 public comments to the proposed text. The first one was received by Kai Wynn, dated May 28th, 2026. And in summary, he supports the zoning text amendment as drafted. The second comment was received this morning at 10:47 from Renata Rhodes. She wants to encourage the Planning Commission to maintain the level of service C standards for intersections. She's concerned about potential loopholes for phase developments or exemptions that may bypass traffic tests. And she wants to urge that we tighten these standards to ensure there is no there is zero loopholes for developers until roads are actually ready. And then lastly, we received from Griffin Benton, who is the Vice President of Government Affairs for Maryland Building Industry Association, a series of comments, suggestions for text revisions to the draft ordinance. Myself and Puskar Carr from Brutus and Associates had a chance to discuss this afternoon. We feel that the comments, we appreciate the comments. There's some good comments in here. However, we feel that that the comments can be more appropriately addressed in the implementation manual. But of course, that's for the commission to make that final determination. But that's our position at this point. With that said, other than that, Mr. Carr is also online from Bruce and Associates, and again, he is the town's consultant on the drafting of the APFO for roads. So if we have some technical questions, Mr. Carr will be able to help address those with staff. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Carr, if you're ready to answer any questions.
I'm ready.
Thank you, Director Dooley. I just have one point of clarification before I turn to my colleagues. When you talk about the implementation manual, is that a companion document or is it an addendum to the, and then what is the frequency of updating that? Is it with the actual ordinance or is it on an as needed basis?
Yes, ma'am, that's a great question. It's a companion document, but it's an administrative document for actual implementation. So it's not, it doesn't come to the Planning Commission, but it basically gets into the weeds in a way that is really not appropriate for an ordinance, but provides much more specificity in terms of processes, procedures, of how the APFO for roads would actually be implemented. And it's again, fundamentally, it's based on what other communities throughout Maryland have done.
No, I think it's a great idea. I was just trying to understand how it was going to be not only used, but also how it's going to be updated. I know that with the ordinance, we talked a lot about this being a living document. As we go forward with implementation, obviously, we're going to learn some things that we didn't know. We don't know what we don't know. So as we go along, so I just wanted to better understand this implementation document, although it's an internal document for use for the planning department. How often would it be updated? That was just my question.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm sorry, I don't think I really pointedly addressed that question. It would be updated. It would be updated on an as needed basis. I would suspect the first year, once we go through that testing period, that there would be some administrative revisions and updates as necessary. But it too is also a living document.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. Let's turn again to my colleagues. Let me look to my left and Commissioner Miller, do you have any thoughts?
Good afternoon. Yeah, my initial question was around the implementation manual, and if you could provide sort of maybe some examples of the specificity that's expected in the manual. Maybe a couple of examples. Like, is it more just instructions like 90 days out, 120 days out, whatever steps, or is it more details within the lines of the ZTA as proposed?
Again, it's fundamentally, it gets into the processes and procedures. I'd like to turn to Mr. Carr. He's had more experience with the implementation manuals, and maybe he can provide a little bit more more reticent comments to your question.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So the implementation manual would provide clarification and establish a common understanding of what is expected out of the TIS submissions. It will clarify and address some of the comments that we received today as well. So it will provide, like, for example, the normal timeframes for the reviews, what to expect on that, who pays for it, how do we determine which study intersections need to be included in the study, the template for a scoping document that we can use for any kind of TISs, things of that nature. So it's more of a procedural document, like Mr. Julie had mentioned, but it establishes a consistency in terms of how we do these reviews and what the developers can expect when submitting these.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So more of procedures rather than, expanded details of the actual code itself, as like, however it's written, whatever the intention is, it is never going to contradict with any words or any.
That's correct.
Does this also, would that require council adoption?
No.
Okay.
No, it's strictly administrative document for implementation.
My questions for now.
Thank you. Let me pull that thread one more time. So what I think I'm hearing is the implementation manual is going to be comprised of standard operating procedures, protocols, industry practices. So
Yes.
it's a compilation of things.
Yes, it is. And the other one that I would add to that would be where staff wanted to provide a little more clarity to the ordinance or policy direction on it. That would be something else that would typically be found in the implementation manual. But again, it all goes back to implement the expectations that are provided in the ordinance.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Well, sorry.
Okay, so as far as I understand the implementation manual, like you've got the ordinance, which is your product, and then you can consider the implementation manual like your instruction manual. So I think last time when we had talked, there may have been a couple things that there was some concern about them being like vague or something like that. But is that something that the implementation manual could come in on and is that kind of what the intention is? Is that if
it fills the gap. So yes,
Okay.
it could do that. If there's, again, as with the other APFO regs that we adopted a while back, or the council adopted recently, the ordinance that you're looking at tonight, it's also, it's a living document.
Right.
So if we find that, hey, there's stuff in the implementation manual that we really it's probably more suited for the code to include, we would bring that back rather than put in the implementation manual. The implementation manual is really, it's an administrative how-to. You've bought the television, now you want to know how to turn it on.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking because obviously there was concern about loopholes, right? So I was wondering like if one was discovered, if that was like, oh, let's go back to the implementation manual and see what we can.
That would be something that it might be addressed in the implementation
Okay.
manual, but if it's more appropriate, we're going to make sure it goes into the code so that it's very clear, particularly for like more big ticket items that we might have missed. But
Right.
I think we've done a pretty good job in drafting it with Mr. Carr's help.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ford.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Gutenberg.
Yes. So on the implementation manual, does it specifically reference it in the code?
It's in the proposed codification for
Okay.
roads. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, and is that document, I want to get to whether that document, I understand it's administrative in nature, but is it a policy document, would you say?
It's it sort of, it sort of closes gaps
Mhm.
where if we have something, and and Mr. Card, maybe you can provide a better example, but if you had something, there was a word that was maybe a little bit too broad, we'd say in the implementation manual, this is what is meant by that word, so that it aligns with the tenor of the ordinance.
Okay, yep, that makes sense to me. What I'm getting at, and maybe because I want to pull the thread on some examples of how that would work in implementation. But what my concern would be is if this is an administrative document, and then it would be under the sole provision of the operations, right, of the
Staff.
yeah, of staff, and therefore really just changes would be at the direction of yourself and the town manager. My concern would be, because of the very long timelines that are involved and the impacts of the way we implement this code, is that I would consider this more like a policy document, and therefore this would, to me, would be a companion in execution that is policy based, really. And what I'm getting at is, I think that manual would be going through the council, and then but the council also may not be the best place to evaluate those nuances. And then that brings me right back here to this room, where the council would, I think I would, as a councilman, if I was going to be evaluating that without the benefit of sitting here, I would want to hear what this group had to say about that implementation manual and how they saw that feathering together. And I know that kind of complicates probably some staff thoughts on that, but
Yeah,
I'm
and
just
I
throwing it
respect
out
the
there, yeah.
comment, absolutely
Yeah.
respect the comment. It's you know, the implementation, the real policy is what's in the ordinance. That's what's driving the implementation
Okay.
manual. I can tell you from my past practices that if there's, I know from my own experience, I know where things start to get a little bit, could potentially get a little wonky, where I don't want to, as staff doesn't want to overstep its bounds,
Mhm.
clearly. And, you know, I can certainly see if there's part or pieces of the implementation manual as we start to draft it. I personally have no problem to get the commission's input on,
Yeah.
you know, on whatever section or sections might come up, just so, because staff is not trying to do an end round or anything like
Yeah.
that. And I want to be fair, and make sure that everybody understands what the intent is. So it's a working relationship, and that's how I would go about trying to implement the implementation manual.
Okay.
Mr. Carr's company, Bruce and Associate, is currently drafting a contract with the scope of work for the implementation manual. So if Mr. Carr's proposal is accepted by the town, he has the advantage of being able to hear all of you, being co-writer of the ordinance. And so I think he certainly has a really
Yeah.
good understanding, but it's what the commission feels comfortable with, but that's how I would
Yeah.
approach it.
I appreciate that. And my reason for asking isn't that I don't think that you know, as commissions or councils, we want to micromanage that, right? Like getting down into the weeds of what happens on these things, I don't think is served for anybody to be for these boards to be involved in that detail. However, where I think it comes in contact with it is especially with the public interest in this, is if the perception of the public is that the administrative staff is not executing in alignment with what they perceive the intent of what the ordinance was, then that's where we run into tension and it comes back around again. So let me ask a couple of questions just related to some of the comments we got from the the MBIA folks, because they were talking about some things that I think would touch on the manual. And what you said in your staff report, I believe, was that you believe that most of their comments could be addressed through that avenue without having to modify the.
Yes, sir.
the ordinance.
That's what myself and Mr. Carr believe at
Okay.
this point. Yes.
So just as a the signal timing assumptions is a good one, right? So that in our ordinance, it talks about signal timing is to essentially the way I read the ordinance, the way it's drafted is that signal timing to be used is the signal timing that's in place today. And the comment is from the MBIA folks were, well, they would recommend that they make some assumptions, be able to make some assumptions about signal timing. The way I read that is, I agree with you. You deal with that in a manual in the following way. If a developer comes in and has signal timing recommendations, to me, that sounds like a mitigation strategy that's being recommended potentially. And I wonder if either through application of the manual or the code as it is, you could take feedback from an applicant on signal timing issues, for example, without having to change the ordinance from what it is.
Yes, I don't
Agree.
disagree with that. That's reasonable.
Okay.
It's, this town has in my humble opinion, my department has a responsibility and a respect for, the development community to partner with them. And I think we're all working for the same goal. At the end of the day, I'm the fiduciary for the town. I want to make sure that with the commission, the council want is what gets executed.
Right.
And I should tell you, as you look through this document, there's a companion document that goes with the BIA document, and there's a series of several check marks and there's a couple X's on here. Those are actually come from staff and Mr. Carr, as far as things that we agree with, things that we disagree with or are not necessary, and those are checked off. I wanted to bring that up.
Yep. Understood. All right. With the sim traffic modeling discussion that was had in the comments we received, this was basically an ask saying, can we do this other method in certain limited situations? And my question to you is, one of the intentions, as I understand it, of what we did with identifying a single, and we had a bunch of conversations about this, about a single standard that we were going to use. The reason for that single standard was because we know we have to do more intergovernmental interactions. And because we are now settling on, we are going to use the same standard the county uses, the same standard the state uses. When you have a traffic study done in La Plata, now that same data can be used across the board with all the conversations with all the intersecting government agencies, right? And so how does that play with the sim traffic modeling piece that they were making comment about?
I'm going to let Mr. Carr address that.
Okay.
So when you say interdepartmental or inter-office, intergovernmental coordination, I would assume that you're talking about SHA or Charles County.
Correct.
So whenever a development project involves a state highway intersection, they will need to follow the SHA traffic impact study manual, and they're going to basically use whatever software SHA would require. So in terms of similar thing would be for Charles County, but in terms of the APFO that the town is recommending, our central requirement that all the analysis will follow the highway capacity manual and the latest version of it. So we wanted to intentionally be generic about that, is because whereas any proprietary software like SimTraffic you mentioned is a proprietary software by Trafficware, and their simulation model follows their algorithm, it can be construed as proprietary to that company, and whether it's widely used by the industry, it is acceptable, and at the current present time, but in future there may be better tools available to do the same. So we wanted to intentionally keep that flexibility within the APFO so that we don't have to go back and list a bunch of software that we must require the developers, engineers to follow. So that was the intention. Now in the implementation manual, we will include a list of, we will recommend including a list of acceptable software that the engineers can use. And again, that the idea there is if that thing changes over time, we can change it at that time as part of the procedural update to that.
Okay.
Yes, and one thing I would also mention that any kind of software we're talking about, there also comes version information. So these softwares are updated almost every year. So then question comes like which version of the software should the engineers be using, and that creates a lot of problems in implementing APFO and interpretation of the results of the analysis and so forth. So we don't want to get bogged down on those sort of intricate details in the APFO as well.
Okay. And then that's then an example where you could deal with the nuances of that where it occurred in an implementation manual. Okay. Do you believe that if there were some comments about level of service at intersections and the multimodal conflicts, right? Where this is where we get into whether we value at certain intersections the pedestrian safety or other bike lanes, crosswalks, those kinds of things. Would those be addressed in the implementation manual as well? Where I guess the question is directly to you, Don, is really or Mr. Dooley, do you believe that you have the flexibility where it made sense to propose conditions that had that took into account those other nodes in an intersection that you could still apply those kinds of reasonable recommendations to the Planning Commission in condition form with this new ordinance?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right, that's good. And then any issues that you feel that you would have with superseding language, which was things related to the allowable thresholds that are already in place in terms of we have intersections that are county owned versus town owned. What I had always assumed was an intersection that is an intersection of a town road and a county road. My street, Prospect Street, turning onto that's not a great example. It's a dead end street with 8 houses, right? but onto Washington Avenue, though, that's a county road. Sure. So we wouldn't be able to impose, right, a different standard on the county portion of that intersection, right? And so that's just my general assumption, but I saw that there was some question on that. Do you believe it's clear enough in the language?
And that's where I think the implementation manual really becomes handy.
Yeah.
Is that we can really sort of elaborate on the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. I know very well that I can't, or the town can't implement or require the county or SHA to make any traffic mitigation improvements. But we can certainly, as part of the development of this manual, reach out and start developing those relationships and at least identify here's what the town of La Plata is going to do if we have recommended mitigation measures that affect your respective roadways, and hopefully develop those relationships so that we merge into appropriate processes that they already have, or to try to develop something that helps La Plata facilitate, trying to get the state or the county to implement or put on their capital improvement projects mitigation measures down the road that will address recommendations that we have no power to control at this point. So that's a really good example of how the manual will help, and it will provide a basis for doing that.
Okay. And you describing that too, and just having this part of the conversation reminds me of one of the issues we dealt with in the past year related to road widths and emergency vehicles in one of the LaGrange development, right? And there was a way to interpret code two different ways, and there was no good way to demonstrate in good faith what the intent really was, right? So it's this manual seems like it is a way to communicate those kinds of things ahead of time. So you have the ordinance, it has the rule, and then this will be dialing in the focus on the specifics.
Correct. I think the manual is meant to transcend all of us. So there's a basis. In the example you gave for at LaGrange, those were standards, if you will, or agreements that had been previously made between the owner and the town. And you'll recall that we didn't want to, we wanted to respect and have that consistency. But moving forward with this manual and what we're doing here, we'll be able to now it'll transcend me and my successors, because now there's something in writing. We're maintaining consistency, which is super important for our own sanity and for assurances to the development community that Town of La Plata standards are not going to change just because we have different faces. There's something in writing, and that's what they value, that that consistency in writing especially.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gutenberg. I just have one follow-up. So we've talked a lot about the implementation manual. So from my perspective, not from my perspective, but from overall general legislative, there's a hierarchy when it comes to policy development. You have the statute, you have the regulation, you have the policy, then you have guidance, then you have an implementation. So the guidance typically is for the stakeholders, the users, i.e. the developers. So are we going to provide, because this implementation manual is internal, it's for the staff to ensure consistency when implementing the policy. But what sort of guidance are we giving to developers when it comes to how they're expected to interpret this ordinance?
The manual ultimately will go online, the same as it does for Charles County or other agencies. It's meant as, again, it's meant as guidance, not only for staff, and I wasn't clear, it's meant for the development community out there as well, so that we're all sort of singing from the same sheet of music, so that they can understand what the expectation is. If they're doing a traffic impact study, they know what to expect. If they're developing or designing early on a subdivision, they know what we're looking for and how we're implementing the ordinance.
So I missed that external facing component of it. I only heard you say it's for internal purposes, but so you're saying it has oh, my apologies.
Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. It's
we're facing
yes,
component.
it is, and I apologize. That wasn't it didn't come to the top of my mind, but that's the intent, is to put it out there. And Mr. Carr, is that, I assume that's pretty commonplace, is it not, in other communities?
It is it is not an internal document. It's going to be a document that will be sent out, like you mentioned, and the ones that I'm familiar with are like that. However, I do want to mention that we are calling it an implementation manual, but we could also call it an implementation guideline. I guess there is a fine line between manual and a guideline. So I am flexible and open to those ideas in terms of what we should be calling it. But yes, the intention is to also provide a level playing field for the applicants, and they want to know, how long it's going to take to get approvals, what do they have to do to receive approvals, what sort of mitigation measures are we asking them to do. We need to be fair, so that's the idea, to provide consistent, fair practice.
I would probably argue that manual would probably be better to retain it just simply because tends to be a little bit more common usage than guidelines. Guidelines suggest that you can do it if you want, but you don't have to. The manual to me is this is how it's going to play out.
So I was trying to do a quick definition of guidance and manual, and I think it could go either way. I think it could go either way. Are there any additional comments, Commissioner Miller?
I apologize. I think I might have missed it. What is the intention with the most recent comments, including Mr. Benton's? I saw the checks and the X's. Is the checks mean if approved and pushed to recommend to the council that they will be incorporated on its way up, and the X's might mean that they're included in the implementation manual? I think I missed it.
Sure. Yeah. What Mr. Carr put the checks represent things that we agree with. We agree with it with the intent of the comment, and the boxes that are checked with a red X, we feel are either unnecessary or not appropriate or not necessary. But the boxes that are checked in the green, I've got a green copy of it, or a color copy of it. Those are ones that we agree with, and those will ultimately be put through in the implementation manual or addressed.
Okay. So if it moves forward to the council, the checks are assumed to be incorporated as
In the implementation manual, yes.
Okay.
It'll be addressed in a form, yes.
Okay.
Because we want clarity too for the community.
Yeah.
We appreciate the feedback.
Okay.
Last, Commissioner Ford.
Madam Chair, I have questions for clarification. So you mentioned that you want to, that we're going to adopt the SHA line of sight standards, right? That's what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think Mr. Carr can address some of the details.
Well,
Did that come from me? I don't remember.
one of you said it.
Mr. Carr, can you maybe jump in here? I'm sorry. Please continue, Mr.
Yeah,
Jones.
that's not
Commissioner
that's not the crutch of the question. So I want to know, because you also mentioned that once you've done that, you'll be able, or once we put this the guidelines out, whatever we're going to call it, that we'd be able to develop a relationship with the state in order to
yes.
actually get stuff done. So what do we need to do, and what are the steps, and how do we ensure that that relationship is maintained over the next 10 years, that we are able to actually make some changes to the state roads that we don't have control over?
Well, Claire, the challenges always are people, right? And so, it's at some point in time, I'm going to have a successor. The county, the state are going to have successors. But I think, it's at least started to establish the precedent where we're developing these real closer relationships. The implementation manual, can do very simple things like, at least now identify the person, what their capacity is, or other people within SHA that might be necessary or useful to be able to work with, so that there's a direct path. We're putting the breadcrumbs together so somebody can follow the organization and the position, and not so much necessarily who that person is at any given time in the future, but it's developing that relationship and developing a long-term goal of working closer with SHA than we have in the past, as well as with the county. And I think that's really what, we create an interagency team, if you will. We're separate entities, right, as a governmental jurisdiction, but you're creating stronger bonds and relationship with adjacent jurisdictions that everybody's going to benefit if they work together.
Do you think that would, you think a memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding to accompany that guidance between two positions in the respective governments might be something that could maybe solidify?
I think that would be, yeah, and I think that's a great idea. And I think that I'm certainly open to doing that if the other agencies are to do the same thing to sort of help, it's help develop that relationship or what that agreement is, responsibility is to each other. It can't be enforced, but at least it provides a documentation of what the intent was. And so it carries over from one successor to the next in any position. It's something that has to be worked on and cultivated ultimately.
Understood. That's it.
Thank you. Final comments? Councilman
Yeah,
Gutenberg?
yeah, I would just actually like to just talk about that a little bit too, what we just spoke about. I think one of the things I think that has that this APFO, all of it, not just the piece we're talking about tonight, does for the community is it really represents sort of an evolutional maturing of the town in its ability to interact with, as we've been growing. Right now, we can interact with these things with other government agencies in the following way. This is the way I see that working, is that because so I believe that staff, county to town, have and do work together and work together well. That is a piece of it. One of the things, though, that helps staff be able to interact is having things like ordinances where it gives a foundation where you can understand what they can talk about in common terms. And especially with La Plata now, because we are producing as outputs of these APFOs, updates to our street maps, updates to the other APFO elements, that gives us a foundation, not only for public awareness, but for the administrative staffs of various agencies to work together. And we've set standards within this ordinance that allow that common set of data to travel as they discuss. Now, but that's not enough. The other piece of it that has to happen is that at the governing body level, right, whether it's the county commissioners or the town council, we have to be able to discuss our priorities. So that starts with being able to articulate your priorities. Then, and this is something I don't think we've done yet, but I hope, maybe after the county elections, there'll be an appetite for this with the new energy that comes with the new election, is that there's opportunity probably for us to have dialogue at the policymaker level where we can come together, show each other our priorities and see where they fit together. And because we built this foundational element with data and ordinances that you can see how they zip together, it makes it easier for then staff to go do something about that at both layers. So that's what I think the really enduring piece of this. And to your point, Mr. Dooley, though, but it's going to take constant attention, right? Because just having all of these here doesn't make the capital improvement plans necessarily work. You've got to stay on your vision. You've got to execute and talk about those things and actually make decisions and commit to them. And those choices aren't always going to be easy, but I think having this information and having done this really evolves us to a higher state of being able to achieve, some of those goals.
Agree.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman Gutenberg. Madam Clerk, let me turn to you. Just want to confirm that we have no speakers signed up to speak this evening, sorry.
Correct, Madam Chair. There are no public speakers this evening.
And Madam Clerk, we have received additional written comments, the 3 that Director Dooley referenced, correct?
Correct, Madam Chair. The only additional written comments were the 3 written comments noted by Director Dooley, and they are attached to the meeting agenda.
Thank you very much. Director Dooley, let me turn to you. Any additional thoughts, comments you'd
No.
like to add?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The public hearing portion of this meeting is hereby closed at 6:49 PM. Commissioners, is there a motion per the planning staff's recommendation to adopt the draft Planning Commission resolution recommending the town council approve ZTA 02-2026 as drafted? Or are there any proposed changes?
That motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Gutenberg, what say you?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yeah.
Commissioner Miller? Commissioner Whale?
Yes.
I am a yes as well. The motion is passed. Thank you all. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 5th, 2026 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? If so, is there a motion to approve those minutes as submitted and/or any amendments?
Motion to approve minutes from the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Gutenberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Ford,
Yes.
Commissioner Whale,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. So that motion carries. The May 5th minutes are approved. We're going to move to the matters of discussion, and I'm going to turn back to you, Director Dooley, to talk about our next ZTA, water, as well as the annual report. So let me turn to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So staff tonight is introducing the zoning text amendment 03-2026, water conservation. This is a request to, oh, I'm sorry, let's go to the PowerPoint we have for you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a request to add Article 11, Water Conservation and Emergency Restrictions to Chapter 191 Zoning of the La Plata Municipal Code for the purpose of providing regulatory provisions for water conservation measures and emergency restrictions on water use, as well as to amend Chapter 191-48 Landscaping of the La Plata Municipal Code for the purpose of facilitating water conservation measures related to the installation of new landscaping for residential and non-residential developments. Next slide. Little background. In September 2025, the town council sought to ensure adequate public infrastructure for new development. APFO standards for water, sewer, and school seating capacity were previously developed, reviewed, and recommended by the commission to the town council on April 7, 26, under zoning text amendment 01-2026. The town council subsequently ordained zoning text amendment 01-2026, and it is now codified in the town zoning ordinance as of mid-May. The APFO for roads is, and when I wrote this, was pending. The APFO has now been approved and recommended to the town council under zoning text amendment 02-2026. Next slide. Because the Maryland Department of the Environment, or MDE, will not expand the town's groundwater permit without supplemental water source, the town is in the process of advancing a three-part water management strategy that includes one, creating an adequate public facilities ordinance, negotiating a supplemental water agreement with Charles County, which is in process, and developing formal water conservation policies under this zoning text amendment. Next slide. Discussion. Under zoning text amendment 03-2026, two sets of draft code amendments are proposed. The text amendments are proposed to be incorporated within the following portions of Chapter 191, zoning of the town's municipal code. The first chapter that we'd be amending is Chapter 191, section 191.48 for landscaping. And second is to establish Article 11, under section 191 zoning for, and it would be entitled Water Conservation and Emergency Restrictions. Next slide. So let me tell you a little background on proposed revisions to chapter 191.48, subsections A and B under landscaping. So staff has drafted that the ordinance would apply to all new residential and non-residential developments subject to a site plan, preliminary plat map, or replacement of existing landscaping for specific areas on a property where the landscaping is being replaced voluntarily. The new landscaping is to rely on regional, native, drought-tolerant trees and plants and other vegetation. High water use turf is also to be limited. Soils must also be prepared to retain water. Any new irrigation must include rain shutoff sensors and to avoid overspray onto pavement or impervious surfaces. And lastly, the landscape plans would require approval. Landscape plans requiring approval must demonstrate compliance with proposed revisions to this section. So basically developing a more water conscious strategy for our landscape development that occurs in the town, however that may happen. Next slide. Under proposed section 191.98A, purpose, applicability, and definitions, combining these, it establishes rules to conserve water during high demand or drought. It applies to all properties on the town's water system. It defines designated large volume users as sites with very high or continuous water demand. For example, consumes an average of 10,000 gallons per day or more, or uses 300,000 gallons of water or more in any single billing cycle, which is 1 month, 31 days, or as determined by the chief executive officer of the town, which is the town manager. Next slide. Section 191.98B is this titled Declaration and Rescission of Water Conservation Alert. The town manager may declare an alert when the town's water production reaches 80% of its permitted capacity or during a drought. A public notice is required when a declaration is made via the town's website, social media, or other communication channels accessible to the town. And then an alert is rescinded once conditions return to non-drought conditions. Next slide. Section 191.98 subsection C, entitled Mandatory Outdoor Watering Limitations under Water Conservation Alert, provides that irrigation would be restricted to an odd and even address schedule. And what this means specifically is that addresses with even numbers would be limited to watering on even number days, and addresses with odd numbers shall be limited to watering on odd number days between 6 p.m. and 10 a.m. And reasonable hand watering is allowed anytime to prevent landscaping loss. And finally, all irrigation may be suspended during severe water shortages when declared by the CEO or town manager. Next slide. Section 191.98D, entitled Prohibition of Non-Essential Water Use under Water Conservation Alert. This provides that in draft form that washing impervious surfaces like walkways, sidewalks, driveways would be prohibited unless they're for health and safety needs, such as hazards or spills that may occur inadvertently. And vehicle washing would only be allowed at recycled water or recycled car washes, so that the water is not just draining from the drain in or from the spigot into the ground, into the drain. Next slide. Section 191.98E, titled Recreational and Decorative Water Use under a Water Conservation Alert, provides that pools and hot tubs may not be refilled, only topped off, that ornamental fountains must use recirculated water, and that all non-recirculating water features must be turned off. Next slide. Section 191.98F, entitled Large Volume Commercial, Industrial, and Institutional Users under Water Conservation Alert. This section provides that the town manager or CEO may require large volume users to reduce their water consumption by a defined percentage in a water conservation alert declaration. It also provides that water reduction compliance would be verified by metered data and town billing records. Non-compliant large volume water users would be required to submit a water reduction plan to the town for improving water retention, such as leak reduction measures, water reuse systems, water usage optimization strategies, and the like. Next slide. Section 191.98G, emergency and health and safety exemptions, provides that water usage for fire suppression, public health, or emergency operations would be exempt. Next slide. Section 191.98H, relationship with alternative systems, provides that the use of gray water, reclaimed water, or stormwater systems would still be permitted. However, these alternative water systems do not exempt users from water conservation restrictions that are outlined in this ordinance chapter section. And then next slide. Section 191.98I, enforcement and penalties. Violations to the proposed ordinance would be treated as a municipal infraction. Each day a documented violation is identified, would count separately as a new violation until compliance is achieved, which is a very common standard in a lot of ordinances for a variety of different land use purposes. And then the town may issue warnings for initial violations. Thereafter, fines may be imposed for repeated violations to this ordinance. Next slide. And the last portion of this ordinance is sections 191.98J and K, severability and appeals. Invalid provisions, if determined by a court action, would not affect the remaining ordinance regulations determined to be valid. Very common in many ordinances around the country. Second, if a state law has water conservation regulations that are more restrictive than those in this draft ordinance, the state requirements would apply. And finally, the draft ordinance permits anyone receiving notice of violation to appeal within 10 days. Should this occur, the CEO or town manager must then issue a final written determination of the violation appeal within 15 days, and the town manager's decision would be final. The next slide. So this brings us to staff recommendations. Staff recommends using the draft water conservation ordinance presented to you tonight as a starting point for discussing what the commission considers reasonable and appropriate measures for promoting water conservation in the town. The Planning Commission, in staff's opinion, Planning Commission subcommittee and/or a commission study session should be held or considered in order to give the commission time to conduct its own research on suitable water conservation measures as it directly impacts all town residents and businesses. And in this particular case, staff feels more strongly about this particular one because it truly affects everybody and how they live in their home or their business. So I think this one, all of these zoning text amendments we're doing were important. This one just a little bit more personal and probably is appropriate to make sure that we get it right on here, what the commission feels is appropriate for the town as residents of the community. So we want to make sure that that there's ample opportunity for the commission to provide their input. And next slide is just questions and discussion. That includes my presentation, and happy to begin discussion and questions. Thank you.
So let me give you my initial reaction. This one is a doozy. And it is riddled with so many complexities. I have a lot of questions already. how do we define reasonable landscaping loss? It's different for everybody. Are we going to have an arborist come in and make the determination? I mean, are we going to grandfather in some of these developments that are already have their irrigation systems in place? And what if my neighbor doesn't like me and sees me watering my lawn on a day when I'm not supposed to? And then this whole, meter data records. I mean, sometimes they are actual readings, sometimes they're not. So it's riddled for me. That's my initial reaction. I'll pause there and turn to my colleagues and see if they have any initial thoughts or comments. So Commissioner Miller, let me start with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot to go over, and I'm sure we will. Yeah, my initial thoughts, town manager can declare an alert at 80%. I think we're at 80 or 90% now. Exemptions, I mean, hospitals and medical centers, there's a lot to work through. So this will be a good one. No specific questions this time besides those.
Thank you. Commissioner Well, any reaction?
So I am probably going to come at this with a little different perspective because I have lived in San Diego County, California. This is common. This could have been pulled directly from San Diego County. These conditions are normal for areas that experience drought. It seems like a lot on paper, but I think personally, and I know it's different if you've never had to actually, follow these types of conditions. But when you get really into it, you kind of realize how much a lot of it really isn't going to apply to you unless you are somebody that likes to water your lawn every single day at 3 p.m. So my question would be, and this is also from having experienced these exact types of conditions, is when you put this into place, I know that there's something about enforcement and the violations and all that kind of stuff. And that is true. People that don't particularly care for you are going to call and say, so-and-so is washing their car. But then at that point, who really responds to that? And how do you keep track of the violations? And how do you really, I know that there's a way in here to enforce it and we talk about it, but like, how do you really do that without exhausting other resources that should be placed elsewhere? So I think a lot of times, having been in an area that did have this, it was more so just people in that area tended to respect that a little bit more just because they were so used to those conditions. And so I do think that you would encounter some difficulty in an area like this where this is brand new. But my perspective is it's not really like a life or death type of, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't mean to minimize that it would inconvenience some people, but the conditions itself are just they're not that strict. But then going back to the landscaping, like who's defining what type of drought, resistant plant is most appropriate and getting into all that. So I think that there's definitely things to talk about, but my perspective is that I think this is reasonable. I don't think it's too excessive.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Ford.
Thank you. Thank you. I have questions. You don't have to answer them now. This is for the record, though. First, the directing of types of turf for residents. I think that is that's going to be a tough point. That's going to be a sore spot for a lot of residents. For somebody telling them what type of turf they can or cannot have, I think we should probably shy away from that. But that's something that we're probably going to get some comments about that. What is the current trend or the current usage of our water system, or what's the stress on it now? Oh, like, are we already, like, I think you said we're already at 80%. Are we already there?
We are close to it. We have
Close to
not
it.
received it, but we're anticipating like in summer months where it could spike. and it may get at 80% or above, but on a normal basis, we're really close to it right now.
Okay, and then and I saw you had a slide that said sharing water usage with Charles County, or what was that?
It was part of the strategy is to develop an agreement with Charles County for water procurement,
right,
to add to our capacity.
Absolutely, and that's a great idea. I think that, with the stalling of the, data center discussion, we might end up with a higher rates for water if they are in need due to other large businesses. Also, residents versus businesses. Who has the hierarchy when you make the call for reduced water usage?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first.
Residents versus businesses.
Oh, who has? Okay, so
Yeah.
that's a question that we would need to probably address.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, we don't want to do our residents wrong. We're all taxpayers, but also, we want to be a business friendly town. So we need to really kind of iron out how that works. I'll leave it there. So for now.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Gutenberg, anything?
Yeah. So I think I've lived a few places myself when I was in the military as well, and have seen and been places where these kinds of things are more common than what we're fortunate to have to experience here. So I look forward to the conversation in doing this, because it is absolutely a tool that is needed, I think, by the town manager. We know where we are with water, and it is very close. And there are going to be times in the future, based on commitments the town has made over decades, that are there, that we are going to have to manage our water resource in certain scenarios more closely. And I think this is a necessary tool that, we had a conversation on the council the other day about how imminently the town manager needs this. And while we are very close, I don't think we're right at the moment where that's going to start happening. So I think we're having this conversation at the right time. I think it is really important for people to understand what applies to existing. I don't think anybody's suggesting that we're telling people that you have to go do something to your existing lawn or your existing yard. I think the most impactful thing, and here's where one of my questions is going to come in, is for an applicant who's coming in proposing a neighborhood, right? A brand new one, we've never seen them before. We know that if we pass something here, that would apply.
Mm-hmm.
My question would be for take a development that already has a DRRA in place, which is effectively a contract between the town and the county, and that developer that sets out some standards on what they're going to do over a 10, 20, 15, 20-year period of time while they're putting neighborhoods in. Does a applicant who has a preliminary plat or a master site development plan already in place, does that get impacted by this? Would we expect that final plats or preliminary plats are adapting or adopting to this new code? How do you think that plays out?
I think that's probably a really good question for the town attorney to address.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a thing that we should definitely iron out with this. And I think, yeah, I really agree with all the previous comments I just heard as well, like that there are definitely some complicated parts of this question that we need to have a conversation about in our communities about, what we think is acceptable, what is needed. But I do think no matter which side of the equation you fall on, I think the one thing that we should consider common among all of us is, water is a shared resource, and La Plata is not an island. It affects what we do in La Plata, affects La Plata, affects the county, it affects the region, and what happens outside of La Plata, what the county does affects La Plata. What happens in our region, affects us. We're in one of the largest watersheds with the Chesapeake Bay. I think there's 18 million people that live in the watershed drainage basin that we're in for the Chesapeake Bay. So there's a lot of things to consider, a lot of moving parts to all of this. I mean, we as individuals though have to play our role in that. So I think this is a good strategy, and I'm happy that we're doing it. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman Gutenberg. And I agree. I think that water conservation is a shared responsibility, but I also want to make sure that we are not penalizing residents because of what could perceived as our mismanagement of the current resources, that water resources that we have. So I think that is something we need to be aware of. And I think on the slide, Director Dooley, there was a suggestion that we have a planning discussion, a working session.
Study session, yes, ma'am.
So I think that's a great idea, and I'm in favor of that. And speaking of the slides, do we have a copy of that, or can we get a copy of those? Were they in our packet?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
slides? Okay,
Oh, for these?
Yeah.
No, ma'am, I
Can we-
finished that today.
can
I
we,
can absolutely
yes.
send that to you.
please, thank you. Anything else about that particular amendment?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
One other thing, last question for you. So, the drought understanding or the plan for during drought is understandable. Is this a stopgap if we're already nearing 80%? Is this a stopgap plan? And do we have a 10-year plan to expand the capacity?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's not necessarily a 10-year plan. It's to purchase additional water capacity for the town through Charles County.
Is that the best solution, or?
Well, it's one of the three strategies,
Different colors. Okay.
including what we're talking about now, and then the APFO that we've adopted for water, sewer as well. So it's three pieces trying to work together, row in the same direction to address long-term water stability and long-term managing our water resources correctly in the future.
So then, assuming that we go with one of those COLAs and that lowers our water usage way below 80%, then we should never actually see this unless there is a serious drought.
Unless there's a serious drought, yes. Or
Understood.
there's something that we don't know about at this time that would necessitate the town manager to implement some of the potential strategies
Yeah.
in here.
This is good. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further? Then let me turn to you, Director Dooley, about the 2025 annual report, unless you have something additional you'd like to add to.
No, ma'am. Just to close this out, then would the commission like to have a special session to discuss water conservation, or would you like to just do this at the next meeting in July to have a broader discussion and receive commission input? You all can do your research, your questions, and we can have sort of a longer study session on it. So we'd have a separate meeting, or we could roll it into the July meeting.
I thought I understood what you were suggesting to be potentially a subcommittee, which would be,
That's
that-
another option.
Okay.
Or to complement the study session, or one or the other.
okay. And a subcommittee essentially would be,
Couple
What-
people.
okay,
And what we would do with that subcommittee is the subcommittee would meet with staff, and we would try to vet out the commission or the subcommittee's thoughts, opinions, ideas, and roll those into a redraft of the ordinance to bring it back to the commission as a whole. Or it could be at a regular meeting or at a special meeting.
it's, well, I was gonna say, if the subcommittee, I'm just trying to tease out what the benefit might be of one or the other, but to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but a subcommittee potentially could be two people volunteer to go off and sort of deep dive that. In theory, I would think you could work more rapidly or maybe with higher quality than with two of us than you could with trying to do this all five like this. And then that group of two would come back and do a presentation with staff
Yeah.
on kind of that. And then we move forward as a group from
Correct.
there. Yeah.
I've seen them done either way, and they're both successful. But yeah, when you're working in a smaller group, you can usually dive into it and get through it faster. And that those two subcommittee members effectively provide additional and more detailed vetting that can be the draft could be revised perhaps a little quicker, bring it back to the commission as a whole as a body to as you pointed out to sort of give a debrief on what was discussed and how we ended up with the revisions that they would bring back to the commission for further review.
So let me ask you this, are we under any sort of time clock? Okay.
No.
So I like the idea of having a subcommittee, but I think it's a chicken and egg thing. I think having a working session with the entire commission to do some sort of high level scoping, and then one or two, three people come together in a subcommittee and flush that out.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on either? That's my thought. Councilman Gutenberg's is an option as well. Any thoughts from any other commissioners in terms of how we should do this?
Madam Chair, point of clarification or question for question for clarification. There's no need date.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
You just said that there is no need date.
There's it's not a deliverable. There's not a deliverable date that we need to have this done by. This is purely a staff initiative for the commission to consider. And so my staff's recommendation is that we take it slow, we think about it carefully, and your collective wisdom can produce a much better document than staff can possibly do on its own. But obviously staff and the commission and subcommittee will continue to work together till we have something the commission feels good about and they're ready to recommend to the council for consideration.
And Chair Banks, if I could, I don't really have a preference for either one. I was kind of curious what staff thought maybe was benefit. And myself, I don't have availability for a subcommittee myself, but yeah, I'm open to either one really.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Commissioner Miller, what any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of gave a high level initial thoughts and I saw you writing them down. I would be in favor of a subcommittee and a working session in our normal battle rhythm, not necessarily like I think you proposed
Special meeting.
a special meeting.
So you would, your preference would be to have the subcommittee go out and flush out based on the little bit of feedback we've given today, and then have a working session with the larger body.
Yeah, I think the subcommittee would be, stay together throughout the whole process. Like they wouldn't close down after this first month, right? That they would be continuous, or maybe I'm misunderstanding what a subcommittee.
No, I think what if I may, Chair Banks, what she was suggesting is that there be that the commission reconvene for July to have a little bit broader discussion after you've all had a chance to sort of dive into water conservation, everything, sort of learn everything there is to know about it, I suppose. And then with some direction, two members of the commission could be appointed as a subcommittee to work with staff and actually drafting it and working out the details that are developed during the broader discussion with the commission at the next hearing. In fact,
Yeah, that was, it sounded like we were kind of leaning towards one or the other, but it sounded like it's me like both. So.
Commissioner Will?
I agree with that approach. I think if we all kind of work together, get some, you know, everybody puts their ideas in the pot, then you can have your subcommittee that's kind of like your closers, you
Mhm.
know, tie it all together and bring it back. And I think that's a good idea.
Any? So by point of order, do we need a motion for this or can we just say,
Yeah, I don't think we need to appoint a subcommittee tonight, but I will bring this back.
okay,
Staff report fundamentally won't change other than some general comments were made here tonight, and then we'll kind of roll up our sleeves the next meeting and have a much more detailed discussion after you all have your
Educated.
opportunity to really dive into this a little bit more.
yes, okay, that
Okay,
sounds
great.
good.
Thank you.
All right. And now the 2025 annual report.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. For those commission members who are not familiar with the annual report, just a quick background. Pursuant to the requirements of Maryland General Assembly, all planning boards and commissions with planning and zoning authority in the state of Maryland are required to prepare and submit an annual report to the Maryland Department of Planning each calendar year. The report documents the prior year's land development approvals. Every report must be completed and filed with the local legislative authority and the Maryland Department of Planning by July 1st of the current year to cover the prior calendar year. So we're talking about January 1st, 25 through December 31st, 2025. The commission's role in reviewing the annual report is to provide oversight of its completeness as researched and prepared by staff. Staff is recommending that the commission approve the 2025 annual report and to adopt a resolution directing approving the 2025 annual report and to submit the report to the Maryland Department of Planning and to the local legislative authority, which is, of course, is our town council, no later than July 1st, 2026. Staff has provided the annual report and the format as provided by the state. And there's a resolution to adopt for the approval of the document. And that includes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the annual report? Has everybody had a chance to look at it? Is there a motion to approve the annual report?
Maybe just one question, just for Mr. Dooley. Is this going to the council before it gets delivered? How is the flow of this now?
What the law basically requires is the planning commission actually approve it.
Okay.
And then it's submitted to the legislative authority, town council, and to the Maryland Department of Planning. There's no further approvals that are required by state law. It's just a notification.
Understood. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So again, is there a motion to approve the 2025 annual report as it is?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Gutenberg? Yay, nay?
Yes.
Commissioner Ford?
Yeah.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Well?
Yes.
I am a yes as well. The motion is approved, the annual report for 2025. Director Dooley, anything else from you?
No, ma'am. I have just a couple comments to make on my, I'm sorry, we are actually at the staff report section.
Well, no, we have a public comment.
Oh, yes.
So let me, because I missed it last month, so let me make sure I introduce the public comment. This is the timing on the agenda when we ask, are there any public comments in the room or online?
Madam Chair, there are no public commenters signed up to speak.
Thank you. Now, let me turn to you, Director Dooley, for your staff report or matters of information.
Okay, thank you. Jumped the gun a little bit on you tonight. Just to provide some reports back, to let you know that I mentioned the Rosewick Apartments 2 is I anticipated what might be coming to the Planning Commission, either this meeting or the next meeting. It looks like it might take a little bit of extra time. They're currently working on some comments that the town made on the traffic impact study. So when they've resolved those, I think we'll be ready to go. Their site plans looks pretty tight, making some minor tweaks to that, but that should be coming to you this summer very shortly. Staff also completed the first plan check already for the Plata High School expansion that the commission approved last month. They are on a timeline to try to pull permits in July, and where staff is doing everything we can to make that happen for them. And then lastly, staff is in the process right now of doing the first plan check for the county library, and I suspect that we will have those comments or to their actual working drawings back to the county in the next few days. So I think we're making some pretty good progress here. We've got traction, and happy to say very proud of my team, and I think we're getting some stuff done now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilman Gutenberg, let me turn to you. Any town council report?
No, I'll just say thank you to you all. There's no additional information for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no additional business before this commission, I will adjourn. It is 7:30. Thank you all so much.